Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. And I guess we got to talk about it, man. I guess we got to talk about what happened on Saturday afternoon in Newark in the Prudential Center as UConn took on Seton Hall, who not only was the last place team in the Big East, but who might actually be the worst high major Power Five program in all of college basketball. Uh, Looked like they were running in mud for the first half. Blew a 7-point lead in regulation to go to overtime. Blew a 5-point lead in 58 seconds in that overtime to lose after a turnover on an inbounds pass with 10 seconds left in the game. Just a ridiculous, almost hilarious way for this team to follow up a road trip to Creighton, where UConn picked off a win for the first time in Omaha that left Dan Hurley so fired up he was calling fans baldy. I don't know, man. I don't even know. It was thoroughly disappointing, thoroughly disheartening, and also probably the most hilarious thing that could have happened in that situation. Just what a ridiculous basketball game. What a ridiculous sport. What a ridiculous team. What is this thing that we all care so damn much about? I don't know. Anyway, listen, we got to talk about it. We got to get into it. We got to just rip the Band-Aid off. I try to take positives out of everything when it comes to this team and this group and this development. Like, I think it's very hard to kind of paint with a broad brush when it comes to talking about teams that are built around 19 and 20 and 21-year-olds, even if they're 19 and 20 and 21-year-olds that are getting paid very large sums of money to go play a sport, right? It's all going to be a growth process. It's all going to be a learning process. It's all going to be a developmental process. It's all going to be a thing where the goal is going to be peaking at the right time, right? It's not like you guys can see all the soccer stuff behind me, right? This isn't like the Premier League. This isn't something where you can win your first 13 games and then sputter to the end and still find a way to win a championship, to win a league title because you were able to get enough points on the board, enough wins on the board before the bottom kind of fell out. It's not like that in American sports, and not like that with college basketball specifically, right? You're peaking to a crescendo. And I still believe that there is a chance to be able to get to that crescendo here and get to that peak. But it's very difficult to find silver linings coming out of that performance. I'll get to them. I have a couple that I've circled. I have a couple things that I am going to think about and discuss when it comes to this team and this performance, and where they can kind of go for the next the next 3 weeks of the regular season before you get to the Big East tournament. Some people will agree, some people might not agree. Some people will say I'm just being a happy clapper and cheering too much. Some people will say I'm probably being a little bit too harsh and hating too hard, but it is what it is, and we'll kind of talk through it all, which is what we always do here on this podcast. I thought the thing that was the most frustrating to me, and honestly something that I have become a little bit too uncomfortably expectant for this group, was the slow start and kind of the sleepy first 10, 15, 20 minutes. For this one, it was complete first half, where it felt like this team was kind of stuck in the mud, right? They weren't necessarily ready for the fight. They weren't necessarily ready for the level of competitiveness and the level of toughness that we were going to get out of the Seton Hall team. And I do think that, with Haas kind of dealing what he's dealing with the fact that Aiden Mahaney is not a UConn caliber player, with the fact that Ahmad Noel has clearly not worked with what this staff is expecting out of him. I think that was always going to be a matchup that was probably a little bit more difficult than people gave it credit for. Just because the way that Seton Hall can defend, the length, athleticism, and toughness that they have, that's what can kind of get to and frustrate UConn right now. And it's very clear that is what happened. The offensive execution is something that has really been lacking in recent weeks. And part of that is just as simple as you're going up against two of the best turnover inducing teams in college basketball, in St. John's and Marquette in that stretch. And you're going up against the one team that is kind of built towards taking away what you want to be able to do offensively in Creighton because of the way that they scheme. The three best teams in the league, the three best defenses in the league. And obviously, when you are struggling with a point guard that is banged up, you are going to have some issues running your stuff in those situations. But I don't think it's just as simple as that basic of an explanation, right? Because there are other teams. That UConn is not the only team in college basketball that is dealing with injuries, that is dealing with some of that stuff, right? Creighton does not have Pop Isaacs, and they have been able to kind of navigate those injuries relatively successfully, right? We saw Auburn win games without National Player of the Year favorite or runner-up Janai Broom. There are ways that you can kind of work towards a solution there, and I don't know if UConn has necessarily done the best job doing that, but I also think that it's kind of just a flaw of the way that this team has been constructed and some of the pieces on this roster. And what I mean by that is when you don't when you run these sets that UConn runs, and I've said this a lot, but when you run the sets that UConn runs, so much of it is about timing, and so much of it is about the precision with where you're coming off of those screens, how good the screens are, the angle that you're setting those screens at, the way that you're able to curl off specific screens. And when we talk about toughness issues, right? It's not just stuff on the offensive glass. It's not just can they stay in front of somebody defensively. It is something as simple as this screen was supposed to be set in this spot, but it was set 2 feet further out because the screener wasn't able to get to where he needed to be. This guy was supposed to run off of this screen, but he wasn't able to rub off his defender on that screen because the defender was able to fight his way over the top and get between the screener and the man running over the screen. It's as simple as when you receive the ball to get into the action, instead of being a step outside the 3-point line, you're a step inside half court, which means that the pass that you have to make or the way that you can kind of get into the action takes a little bit longer and is a little bit further out. It is not being able to control your dribble so that when you are making the pass into the action, it is, on time and on target. And it's just little things like that. When it builds up and builds up and builds up all within the same set, you don't get the same looks that you're able to get. You don't get the same offense that you're able to get. You don't get the same, the actions that you run are not as effective. And I think more than anything else, that is what's kind of hampered UConn over the course of, I'm going to say, since probably the Butler game at home that ended up going to overtime. And it started to build up. Some of it has to do with the fact that Liam wasn't there. Some of it has to do with the fact that Haas is kind of a shell of who he was at the start of the season. I think some of it has to do with the fact that Aiden Mahaney is not ready for this, and Ahmad Noel is very clearly not trusted by the coaching staff. And you put all of it together, and there is a real lack of playmaking and a real lack of facilitating and a real lack of just kind of steadiness and toughness in that backcourt. Say whatever you will about Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer. You're not going to find anybody tougher than those two dudes. Cam was a little bit more visceral with it, but Tristan was like, he just got where he wanted to go because he was 6'4", 210 and said, I'm going to get to where I want to be able to run this set from. And there's nothing that you could do about it. He was slow. He was methodical. It took him 6 seconds to get across half court, another 3 seconds to get where he needed to be, but he was going to kind of get you on his hip. He was going to slowly dribble the ball, and he was going to get the ball where it needed to be on time and on target, largely due to the fact that Donovan Clingan was a great screen setter. Guys like Cam Spencer and Steph Castle and even Alex Caravan at that point when he was the 5th guy on the scouting report, they were very good at being able to set up screens and get off of screens and get where they needed to go within those sets. And it's just not the case with this group right now. Everything seems just a little bit out of sync. And I think that some of that can be put onto the fact that they've had to deal with injuries. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this team is just not built for what UConn expects out of a team and an offense and a basketball program at this point. And I don't. I think that is. I saw a quote from Alex, and I'll read it here. My guy Joe Aruda, he posted this, but Caravan said, "quote Us players don't take every game seriously and don't treat every game life or death the way that the coaching staff does. And it's our fault. It's completely on the players. We didn't show up ready to play. We were soft the entire game, and it's on us. Coaches prepared us. They did everything the right way, just like they had for the Creighton and the Marquette game. It was our mentality. It was our approach." And I do think that there is a lot of truth in that, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily debatable. I also think that there is a level of, I said this earlier in the season quite a bit, right? There needs to be a point where the staff is teaching as much as they are coaching perfection. And I think that that still is very much true here. And I think that there's probably a little bit of a confidence issue going on there, specifically with Alex. It was nice to see him kind of get going a little bit, but I think there's probably a little bit of a lack of a leadership situation going on right there as well. Just when the guy that people are looking towards, when it comes to being the veteran leader on the roster, is the guy that is struggling with his headspace when it comes to stuff offensively. That is not a great spot to be when you are a basketball program, right? And I said this last night, and I'll play the clip from last night's episode of After Dark when it was Fanta Gooden and I. And I've gone back and forth on how critical I really want to be about this group. Because on the one hand, they are all of what, 72 hours, 96 hours removed from winning at Creighton, going into Omaha and winning. It's very clear that there's something about Seton Hall that is just kind of the bugaboo place for them to go play. That is the place where they struggle. I don't know if it's just in their head. I don't know if there's been a hex that's been put on it. I don't know if Dan Hurley has PTSD from his time when he was at Seton Hall. I don't know what it is. But there's just something about Newark and the Prudential Center where UConn goes in there and just finds a way to be able to lose. Was it 2023, the COVID season, when they were up by 17, I believe it was. Yeah, they were up by 17 points. And Dan wasn't there, and Kamani wasn't there, and Luke was coaching, and everything just kind of melted away at the end of the game. And I think it was the same kind of thing where there was a turnover and an offensive rebound and a tip in that cost them the game at the buzzer. That was towards the end of that really weird run in January when they were kind of struggling there. But and I don't think I necessarily want to be super critical of it, because I do believe that there is still a way out of this, right? I guess the way that I would phrase it is I don't want to put the post-mortem on this season yet. And internally, while I'm sitting here watching that happen, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, well, this is who needs to, who probably is going to get run off, and this is who they can target in the portal to try to fix this. And this is a player that I saw that might make sense in this role, and all that. But I still have hope that the season isn't a total loss. I will say this, though. Pissing away a 7-point lead in the final minute of regulation for a program that has the level of expectation that UConn does should be something that is considered unacceptable, right? It's really, really bad. Doing the same thing again in the same game with a 5-point lead in 58 seconds in overtime is just as bad, right? There is a level of championship mentality that a program like this should have that this team did not have in Newark on that night. And they did not have in Newark when they gave away that 17-point lead, and they still found a way to win a championship in that season. But point blank period, that the way that game ended was something that should not be and should never be considered acceptable within this program. But I don't really want to rehash it too much, right? I don't think that going down the rabbit hole of what happened at the end of that game is necessarily something that's going to be helpful to anybody, right? But I will say the officiating down the stretch, since it was a thing in my mentions and it was a thing on on the social channels that I am on. I thought that some of the calls down the stretch were absolutely abhorrent, right? But that shouldn't matter. It was at Seton Hall. The only team Seton Hall's beaten this season is DePaul. The fact that this game was left down to a couple of bad whistles is a sign of the problems, right? And I don't think it's something where, and we even heard Dan after the game, like he didn't come out and destroy them the way that I was kind of expecting, right? And we had, and yeah, it was, I don't think that you can pin that one on the refs. It should never have been left to put in their hands. I don't ever think that it's necessarily something where you can blame officials for a single call but at the end of a game, but especially not when you were at Seton Hall. But I also will say some of these bad performances run deeper than just this loss, right? Like if we're going to be frank about it, if we're going to be real about it, let's go back to the Butler game at home when they really struggled, when Butler was able to take them to overtime. For me, that one was more what was going on the defensive side of the ball, and I would actually make the argument UConn's gotten better a little bit defensively, but it was still not a good performance. You get taken to overtime by Butler at home. You got to come back from 18 points down at home against DePaul to be able to win that game. When you win at Marquette, that had as much to do with solo ball going absolutely nuclear and Shaka Smart's team deciding they didn't want to make free throws that night as it did with UConn playing a great basketball game. They turned the ball over 25 times. You didn't have a great game if you turned the ball over 25 times. They got a way to win. They gutted out a win. It was gutsy. It was tough. It was impressive. It was so much fun to watch. But they won that game because solo ball went absolutely nuclear, right? They won at Creighton, not because they had the best 40 minutes you've ever seen a UConn team play. It's because Liam McNeely did something that we haven't seen a freshman do that wasn't named Steph Curry or Kevin Durant. 38 points, 10 boards, and 5 made threes. So all that said, UConn has not looked great for probably the better part of 3 to 4 weeks. A lot of that has to do with Liam McNeely not being there. Liam McNeely's now back, and they won those 2 games because they had 2 guys completely take over and win games more or less on their own. They had their all-league talent bailing them out, more or less. And when you don't have your all-league talent bailing you out and you're going on the road in the Big East, this is the result of what happens down the stretch of games. So I want to spin this forward, and I want to spin this in a positive light. And I want to find a way to be able to think positive thoughts, put a silver lining on it, however you want to phrase it. I don't care. I don't like being super negative about this stuff, and that we can save those bigger conversations for what happens in the offseason. Because I will say, if you are good enough to beat this Creighton team at Creighton, and if you're good enough to beat this Marquette team at Marquette, you are good enough to be able to beat whoever you need to beat in the Garden to win a Big East tournament. You are good enough to be able to string together the kind of performance that you need to be able to get to the second week of the tournament, provided that, they end up as a 9 seed. Hopefully you get like an Alabama or a Florida instead of Auburn or Duke. But either way, I do think that there are reasons to still remain positive here. And I'll start with this. It's clear that Haas has not been 100% for a while, but I think that he looked about as good as he's looked since the Creighton game at home in terms of how he was moving. I don't think he played his best game. I think that he was moving a little bit better than he has been. And I would hope that that we're going to find a way to be able to get him back closer to 100% here at some point soon. Alex has been a mess. We all know that. But he saw a couple of threes go in. And outside of that, he did some things that really, really helped this team make their run once he got going, right? After he banged that first three, he had an assist to Sampson on a roll. He freed up solo ball for an open 3 on 2 possessions after that because he set a ghost screen and 2 defenders went with him, freeing up solo for an open 3. He had a fadeaway possession after that got UConn up to about a 5-point lead. He had a couple of really important defensive plays that he made. Then he banged what should have been a dagger with like a minute and 20 seconds left to put UConn up by 7. A play, I should add, that UConn ran specifically for him to get a 3. All the struggles that he had, Dan Hurley ran a play for him to get the 3 when they needed it the most, which should tell you everything you need to know about Hurley's faith in Alex and how important he knows that he is for this team moving forward. He was definitely better, even if there were some mistakes inbounding the ball down the stretch, which, again, not going to talk about. Not going to talk about it. I thought Stewie struggled on Saturday, but he has shown the flashes of being an impact scorer off the bench, a very real weapon. And like I said earlier, I've been making the argument for 3 weeks now that they have looked much better on the defensive end of the floor than they have in the past, than they have in games before that, earlier on in Big East play, right? Get better offensively, get Haas healthy, get Alex to being a threat, and you do all that stuff, and the confidence and the swagger is going to start to come back. This is not a team that is unflappable when it comes to confidence and character and mental toughness, right? They need to have it kind of developed and grown and ingrained in them, and they don't have it right now. And I think that, a win at home against Villanova would go a long way to helping them, because if they play the way they did in Newark next Sunday in the Garden, they're going to lose by 30 of that St. John's team. So I still believe noise can be made in March. I still hope they beat Villanova by 1,000,000. I still hope they go into the Garden and win that game against St. John's. But I will say that was a dispiriting loss, a frustrating loss, and one I'm just going to chalk up to the voodoo that comes with this UConn team and program playing in Newark these days. Anyway, let's get into that segment. Here is John Fanta, Jeff Goodman, and myself from Saturday night's episode of the Field of 68 After Dark. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or two from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against-the-spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description.
Welcome back to the Field 68 After Dark. Still got a lot to get to, and we will have the afters as well to get to everything else in college basketball. Here we go. A game in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center. This was not a marquee game on the slate heading into the day because the Seton Hall Pirates entered the game having won just one time since December the 5th. They were 1-12 in the Big East. They are now 2-12. After trailing by 7 points with 36 seconds left in regulation and mounting an improbable comeback just to force overtime on a Dylan Ade Wusu 3, then down by 5 with a minute to go in overtime, UConn's unable to get the basketball in bounds in their backcourt. A steal and a game-winning bucket by Scotty Middleton seals an absolute shocker. UConn drops to 9-5 in the Big East. Really say goodbye to those regular season title hopes. They were already waning. 69-68, the Pirates shock Connecticut. Rod Doster, what do you make of this?
The way that they lost is something that should be considered unacceptable, right? Those late game turnovers, the inability to get the ball in out of bounds, and frankly, like I've gone back and forth on how hard I want to go here, right? Because I think on the one hand,
don't be soft, Rob. Do not be soft.
That was a soft performance from UConn, right? And I think that anybody watching that game could see that. On the other hand, this is a team where they are dealing with the weight of expectations that come from another team that won back-to-back national titles. And let's be frank, this team is just not that good, right? They are like a 9-10 seed kind of a program right now, kind of a team right now. And, it feels like a lot of what we've been saying, at least what I've been saying on the Top Dogs pod is, wait until Liam gets back and then we can get a real sense for it. Or wait until Haas is healthy and then we can kind of get a real sense for what this team can be. Wait for this, wait for that. And I think the truth is that this group is just not tough enough as a whole, physically or mentally, and does not have the talent level that we've come to expect out of a UConn program. And I know it's going to make a lot of people happy that they have a night where they can kind of dance on Dan Hurley's grave, so to speak, and celebrate the one guy that has kind of been unafraid to be polarizing and come out here in the press and in press conferences and say whatever the hell he wants to say. I don't think he cares if people don't like him, but because of the way that he's kind of handled wins at Creighton, he's going to have to sit there and kind of take the people getting their swinging on him here. But I do think that eventually this thing will get turned around. I don't know if it's going to be this year. I keep kind of telling myself, right, Jeff, like this is the way this thing is kind of going. A lot of these pieces are going to be around for maybe another year. And maybe this is just them getting ready and the learning curve that they have to get to be able to, see Jalen Stewart and solo ball and Terrace Reed and even Aiden Mahaney next season have a chance to go out and win a Big East championship. But if you're going to play like this team doesn't have a shot to do anything like that. And that was, again, an unacceptable way that game ended. And honestly, unacceptable the way that it started as well. Goodman?
I mean, for me, again, it was shocking to watch the end of the game and the lack of execution and the inbounds passes, especially with like Alex Caravan and Liam McNeely making those passes, right? Like you think like Caravan's going to find a way. Now, again, somebody slipped on one of them, but the baseball pass was atrocious. The execution was really bad. They had the game won in regulation and in overtime multiple times. This is, like you said, they're a good team. They're not a great team. The question I have is this team capable of falling into like first four territory? Now they have Villanova next, which you would think they win at home. But if they don't, then you're talking about them really being in first four territory, because then they go to the Garden in a game that we'll be at next Sunday afternoon where they play St. John's. And right now, again, their confidence is shaken. Like Caravan was better today, but he's still not the same player that he was at the start of the season or last year. There's more pressure on him. Again, I feel like they've got nothing. Their bench gave them nothing. And it's just a lot of the guys just haven't made the jump that we thought they were going to make this year. And then, Aiden Mahaney's struggling, obviously. He can't even get in the floor again today. But going back to what you said about Hurley, here's the one thing I will say is like, listen, if you're going to dish it out, you better be able to take it.
Right.
That's the biggest thing
Absolutely.
I would say to Dan Hurley is like, you're going to act that way and puff your chest out. Then you got to be able to take the shit when people come after you and you lose to Seton Hall. And I think he did it today. I mean, obviously it was against his former program, against a guy that he loves and Shaheen Holloway, so it was a little bit easier to do so. But again, I think, will he be humbled a little bit? I don't know. I mean, probably not, knowing Dan. I think he'll figure it out and flip it, and they'll be really good again next year.
No, he's never going to be humbled, but like and when you win back-to-back championships, like you probably don't deserve to get humbled. But I will say this, like he's going to have to take the hits, and there's going to be a lot of hits based on the way that this game ended. I just want him to store every single one of those in his head and make sure to show it to all these guys on the team, because that's the kind of stuff that's going to motivate him. So everybody that's saying something mean to Dan Hurley right now or tweeting about him, just remember, he doesn't forget that stuff. Like that's going to sit there driving him insane and motivating him for the next 2 years while he gets this thing rebuilt. I'm not worried about it. UConn will be back.
I mean, he could be he could be coaching Luca right now. Luca.
Yeah, I don't know if he wants to do that whole brigade either. It also means he has to deal with okay. I'll give my 12-second take on it.
Go ahead.
UConn missed in the transfer portal. The standard was created when he comes back to UConn and says, I want to win a third national championship. When you say that, it gets created. So we're talking about
how about when he said, when he said, why aren't we ranked number 1 in the preseason? Remember, he thought they were slighted.
Right. And what I was just saying is, when that's the standard that's created, then there's pressure put on you. And those kids, like Alex Karaban hits a wall, but I just think UConn fans, I know you want to win another one. You're also harsh on your guys. Like, if you win a tournament game or two, if you make the Sweet 16 with this team, it still should be a good year. And I just think there's a lot of people around that program right now who are like feeling they built this monster pressure. And you have to accept the fact that you're not that team. You're just not. Teams like last year don't grow on trees.